Hello and welcome to the Genuine Learning Blog. My name is Melissa Galasso, and I'm excited to be here to talk about a very important invitation to comment that has just come out of the FASB. So for those of you who've been following over the last couple of years, the COVID-19 related funding, every time we had new funding, whether it was shuttered venue operating grants or PPP loans or trying to make decisions about provider relief funds, oftentimes the problem was for-profit entities didn't have any guidance in US GAAP. So while the International Accounting Standards has IAS 20, we don't have any equivalent for-profit entities in the United States. 958-605, which works great for not-for-profit entities, unfortunately scopes out those that are for-profit entities. And so transfers of assets from governments to businesses are explicitly excluded from ASU 2018-08. As a result, we've had a gap in GAAP that FASB has decided that they want to address. And given the volume of funds that we have now and will probably continue to see for some time, FASB has introduced an invitation to comment to talk about government assistance for business entities. And this is a very important standard because we are looking at this invitation to comment to figure out, well, what can we do in terms of making this as easy a transition as possible? And so one of the things that they have been kicking around is that when we look at the alternatives offered by the AICPA during this time, right, for-profit entities had to do some type of accounting for shuttered venues and for provider relief funds and restaurant revitalization. They had to do something. And so they've been given multiple options. They could analogize 958-605, or they could analogize IAS 20. And so the FASB board decided to take a look at IAS 20, since again, it's already written, and see what they can do with this. And so in this invitation to comment, they are looking at accounting for government grants. So while IAS 20 is much broader in terms of government assistance, the way that this ITC is looking at is specifically government grants by business entities and the potential use of IAS 20 for the accounting for these items. And so one of the things they're considering is potentially incorporating IAS 20, which is accounting for government grants and disclosures of government assistance, into generally accepted accounting principles here in the United States. So this was just issued on June 13th and comments are due September 12th. And again, all this is trying to do is address the issue that we currently do not have any guidance for-profit entities on recognition and measurement. We do have guidance on disclosure because that was issued in 2021, but we're really struggling here. And so the purpose of this is not to propose an outcome. In fact, this is an invitation to comment and not an exposure draft. They're not providing information about what they think we should do. Instead, they're saying, here's IAS 20. In fact, the exposure draft or the ITC includes a copy of the verbiage of IAS 20, and they're soliciting stakeholder feedback about, okay, would the recognition, measurement, and presentation requirements in IAS 20 be operable here in the United States? Because again, when we look at government assistance in the United States, it might be different than for the IAS and the IFRS companies that are applying this overseas. And so they want to understand whether IAS 20, as it relates to, again, government grants, is a workable solution here in the United States. Now, here are the questions that they're asking us to consider. First, are the requirements, including scope and definition of the term government and government grants, understandable and operable in our U.S. environment? Again, it was not written with the U.S. in mind, so is that an operable solution? They also want to ask whether these the requirements improve comparability, because today some entities are applying 958-605 by analogy. Some of them are applying IAS 20, and you get different outcomes. The timing of recognition is different, and in IAS 20, you can net the item against the related expense versus related having to recognize income, which is in 958-605. And so they want to understand, will this improve the comparability of accounting? And then are there any suggestions that we want to make related to IAS 20 and why we would like to do them? So for example, you might look at something and say, hey, I like this for the most part, but these are the two things that I think are not operable. Here are some changes that we might want to make to IAS 20 in order to make it more operable here in the United States. And again, does the requirements provide decision useful information to investors? So they have questions for both preparers as well as investors to understand, would this be helpful? And then, are any current practice issues going to arise when we start to apply IAS 20? Now, we know that there are lots of for-profit, especially SEC companies, who are applying IAS 20 already, but through analogy. The question is, if we mandate this, especially scope, what would be the impact? So they are not looking at disclosures. As I said last year in November of 2021, they issued ASU 2021-10, which is disclosures about business entities, by business entities about government assistance. And since that has already been issued, they are not planning on looking at the IFRS version of disclosures. So when you're looking at IAS 20, you can ignore the disclosures because those are already addressed in US GAAP. Now, as I said, there are no preliminary views. The board has not said what their thoughts initially are, neither has the staff. Instead, what they're really looking for are the responses to this invitation to comment and what they decide to do in terms of the agenda on recognition, measurement, and presentation. So they have basically a clean slate, and it's our opportunity to provide them with feedback about what we would like to see in practice. So hopefully you found this very useful and that you might consider providing a little bit of feedback. This is a very important step to close the issues that we have for-profit entities regarding lack of government assistance guidance, and whether this would be the easiest and fastest way, or whether we should try to come up with a US GAAP alternative, or whether there are any cheats and tweaks that we need to make in order to make it more operable. So I want to thank you guys so much for joining me, and I look forward to seeing you on a future version of the Genuine Learning blog. Have a great day, guys. Bye-bye.